tonight. So proud of you, Tara, and so excited for the future of Fangoria. And this is cool. Already a forum for South Asian genre filmmakers, although I still feel like a tourist and a poser. I have some films that qualify, but still so much to learn. So, I'm here to learn just as much as I am here to speak. Excited to have the filmmakers of Evil Eye, which is out now on Amazon, correct? Yes.
Right
And,
now. Yeah.
brothers Elan and Rajeev Dassani. And I guess we'll just start with each of us. Elan, we could start with you with a quick introduction, how we got here, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this is a film. I mean, that we were approached by Blumhouse, to pitch to direct this film Evil Eye, from writer or Marjorie Shekhar, based on her audio play. And basically, that was an audio play that the Blumhouse and Amazon was doing, and our main thing was, how do you make it like into a movie? How do you make it something that's visual and cinematic, and turn the sequence, because the original play was all phone calls. And so we had a pitch about how to sort of adjust the script, about sort of visual flourishes, the writing, story points, all kinds of things. And we made like a sort of a, like a mock trailer for it. And basically that's how we got on the project. This was about 2 months before filming was to start. So it was a fairly fast process, actually. All this happened. So it was kind of fun.
And Rajeev, did you go to film school? Start, like, if you can tell us a little bit more about leading up to Evil Eye.
Yeah, sure. Our path has been quite circuitous in a lot of ways. I'll give you like a very fast kind of I went to USC, and basically when I came to LA, I went to USC. Long kind of went directly into the business. I came out of USC with a short film called A Day's Work, which sounds braggy, but it won the Student Academy Award, which is kind of fun. And please seek it out, anyone out there. But basically, Elon and I together, we've always been writer directors, but we kind of have bobbed and weaved. So we ran a VFX company for a couple of years that we founded. We produced and directed international shoots for various TV shows like Hannibal and Master of None, among others. And kind of like the last things that kind of led to here was we made this short film called Seam, and essentially Netflix saw it, and then we pitched this series Jinn to them that they bought, and we produced in Jordan, their first Arab original. And that was kind of like our first big project, and as writers. And then after that, essentially that show led to a bunch of other opportunities, including Evil Eye. And Evil Eye kind of came along as a result of, I think, all the momentum from essentially what had come before. But I think what was really nice was that it combined our kind of like love of grounded drama and genre, our visual effects background to kind of make New Orleans look like India, and then our international producing experience. Those things kind of all melded together to make us kind of bright for Evil Eye in a lot of ways.
Did you not shoot in India at all?
We had a second unit shoot in India, basically. So it was, we had a team there, but they basically took care of the, they essentially followed a set of instructions of exactly what we needed.
Okay, because I was like, we did Assassination Nation in New Orleans, but I was like, the yellow and black, the middle of the street, you're not getting that. I was like, you guys are VFX guys, so maybe you can surprise me. But I was like watching the credits, I was like, did they do this whole thing in New Orleans? But okay, I'm glad you gave us that context, because I've been producing for like 12 years, and I've yet to just Blumhouse call me and say, hey, do you want to do this film? Like, it's like, but telling us the background, and I'll give you a quick rundown of my background, because you guys actually went to film school, which
well, so Rajeev went to film school.
Okay.
I came out of undergrad, and basically I went straight into the industry. So we took kind of the two parallel paths, because he went to film school, and I just worked in the industry. I did all kinds of things. I worked in in like production. I worked in like development. I learned some aspects of producing. So I sort of got an all around thing. And then once he got out of film school, then we got back together. So we kind of took the lessons from both sides and combined them back together. So that was the idea.
Well, I do want to also ask some questions that aren't asked in typical panels because this is South Asian as a genre filmmaking. So
Sure.
We've heard every question.
So because this is South Asians, making that move, usually when I meet someone that's in the industry in their 30s or 40s, I always ask them what their first career was, because we had to do something that wouldn't freak our parents out. And then usually I ask, and I'll go back to my bio. Usually I'll ask, okay, what was your first career? And then second is, how disappointed were your parents? And so I want to pose that question. And maybe they weren't. Maybe they're artists as well, and they're open to it. But that's very interesting for our culture. You're starting to see it now. Like it's amazing because of our, we have Bollywood, but that's just not seen as the viable American, career. And maybe it's not, but but so was that just like you had a very encouraging background, or was it something that kind of caught them off guard? Because both of you too, two sons.
I mean, they were pretty. Oh, Elan, go ahead, Elan.
Well, I was just saying, Rajeev, you can't go into the rest of it, but I'll say that in undergrad, Rajeev, he majored in sort of film studies and in communication. And then I majored, so I was the quote good son, because I did computer science and business. And then
now that's making sense.
Thing is, and then when we both moved sort of after school, we sort of took a year sort of down, and then we both moved to Los Angeles at the same time. But Rajeev went into film school, and then I sort of took my computer science background and began to apply the technological and business side to the industry in that way. And so I began doing like graphics and things like that. So I effectively took the computer science side and applied it to film, which eventually led to doing a visual effects company. So that was sort of an artistic, sort of computery thing that was our version of that.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing for them has always been, I think, just the stability, because as you know, film is an inherently unstable business. You don't know when your next paycheck's going to come. You don't know when the next project will greenlight. So I think that's been the hardest part. And in fact, they even, I remember like partway through our Netflix shoot, our dad called us and was like, so I hope things are doing well. I just want to make sure that they've paid you. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was just like, well, I don't know. I just want to make sure that you guys get paid for the work you're doing. And it's just, there was kind of a lack of, I think Indian parents often, South Asian parents don't always understand something that's not a very regular paycheck. What I think on the flip side, though, is that what has been very positive is, especially, I think, whenever certain big names or awards have come along, that's reassured them. The Student Academy Award was very reassuring. And this project, ironically, I think Jonas's name was very reassuring, because that's someone they knew as like a major powerhouse.
They could kind of care less about the other actors that we worked with in the past. Like they don't know who Jonathan Banks is from Breaking Bad. They don't know who Timothy Oliphant was. They know. So
yeah, it was a very big deal, and that was great.
I remember I got my fourth film, which was my first film in Sundance, The Lifeguard with Kristen Bell, and I told my family, and it wasn't until my mom works in a pharmacy, and she went and like her coworkers were like, Sundance is a really big deal, and then it was like validation, like right. It's just like, oh, okay, like that third party validation that starts in our childhood that continues along. Well, you were talking about the computer science, and that was like speaking my language. I studied accounting. I'm a former CPA, and I did production finance and accounting at Warner Brothers for 5 years. So like the first film set I ever stepped foot on was Batman Begins in London, like Superman Returns Australia, V for Vendetta Germany, and shows like Entourage and One Tree Hill. And then after 5 years of doing that, when I was 29, about to be 30, so just when your family thinks they're off to the races, they're doing great, it's like that's when I cut it and said I was going to be an independent film producer, and brought shame to my family, and you know, from there, I've always leaned into, much like computer science, accounting, it's a very logic-based analytical thing. So I talked, and anytime I speak with at film schools or whatever, it's like those backgrounds really do help us. And at first I used to be embarrassed because of my accounting background, but then I realized that's my competitive advantage, because it's like, you need someone, I'm not the creative genius of the team, but you need someone that's paying mind to the boring stuff, you know? So are there other ways that your former career or other things have positively affected you? And I know this is specific, you know, trying to stick to the topic of South Asians in genre. It's like, how, you know, this film happens to be genre. Do you consider yourself a genre filmmaker, or are you looking at all kinds of things?
I mean, we look at all kinds of things, but I will say that we, most of like what we do is genre. I would say like our main kind of, you know, a brand, for lack of a better way of saying it, is like grounded stories with high concept genre, kind of commercial spins, always kind of about something kind of thematically rich, basically. It's sort of what we always aim for. But in terms of like kind of like from the South Asian side and the skills, I mean, I think it's funny. This is the first project we've done that has a South Asian side to it, actually. Like all of our previous work, films, writing, screenplays, TV series, like, you know, had a kind of an interesting diverse component usually, but not South. I think we almost intentionally didn't do South Asian for a while. And now we have like 3 projects in development that have a South Asian bent to them. I think it's sort of like we found that the industry is kind of caught up to the culture to a certain extent. And now we can kind of use it to our advantage to tell those
the other
stories.
thing too about sort of the like South Asian side, and especially the parents and the community, is there is a level to which there's a sort of an aspect of humility. And the thing like what I mean about that is, like, you know, like when I go home and I go to the auntie uncle parties or whatever, it's not like anyone particularly cares who won at the Oscars or what the Emmys are, or that this person making this movie. Nobody cares. And so you do go home and it is like, oh, right, there's a whole world out here where no one gives a shit. And so it's kind of like, so we're, you know, I always test a movie, like even something else. I'm like, all right, is my dad gonna like this? Is my mom gonna like this? Like, there are things I think, oh, they're gonna love this. They don't get it like at all. Too much talking. And then something that's very visual, like a thriller or something that they get. I'm like, okay, I'm like, just to speak the language of the rest of the world is something I think not all filmmakers kind of realize they're making it for an audience. If that makes sense.
I think that's a, you know, great point, because sometimes people are like, well, I'm looking at your projects and this, and it's like, going back to my CPA background, it's like, well, I'm doing projects based on the marketplace, and the marketplace for the last decade has told me to do this. It's not the only projects I had. I couldn't get those made. And now, like you're seeing, it's like, oh yeah, diversity is not a new thing for us. We've been saying this forever. You're ignoring, you know, a billion people potentially, and that kind of stuff. And that's what I loved about, you know, your film, because like not that many opportunities do I get where it's like, I understood the kind of culture. You didn't have to get, and you didn't spend too much time explaining it, but it's like I had a certain cultural understanding with the, you know, characters. And I still do love the fact that, like, in the end, it is like, listen to your mom, which I feel like your parents can still be proud, you know, proud of. And, you know, there was that one line where it's like, you know, I can't remember exactly how it went, but it's like, you know, everything was going okay, and then when it wasn't, you invented, you know, you created that. And it's like, wow, that just described, you know, every, you know, and I just go ahead.
Yeah, now that or line was, now that there's nothing to worry about, you have to invent something to worry about.
Yes, that's our lives, you know. And, you know, speaking of like that third part, that validation, where it's like, so how, you know, names like Priyanka, you know, Chopra Jonas and Anjali Acharya, like how did the pieces of that come together? Did they come with the you know, podcast or afterwards?
Yeah, we were hanging out with Priyanka one day, and then
yeah.
That's not the case. No, I mean, basically, they actually, interestingly enough, Priyanka's producer at the time, Nina Aujla, who's wonderful, and she was on set with us as well. She actually found the play originally. So, like, Priyanka Chopra Jonas and her company Purple Pebble, along with Nina, essentially started the initial package and approached Madhuri about the play, and they then brought it to Amazon and Blumhouse. And I think from there, it then became a part of this Welcome to the Blumhouse package. So like they had already been developing this kind of 8-film slate, basically.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, like they were at the very beginning. And I think what's been nice about Priyanka's involvement especially is that, she and Nina were both very involved. Like Priyanka looked at costumes, she looked at casting, she talked to us on the phone multiple times about creative. And I think her biggest priority was making sure that it did serve and worked for a South Asian audience. Like she didn't want Indians in India especially to roll their eyes and say this is just a Western movie. Like she wanted them to identify with it. And I think that was something we were very mindful of, which is kind of nice to have that, because that wasn't the kind of like top priority of the executives at Amazon and Blumhouse, because they were primarily not Indian. So it was like they had a lot of other priorities about quality, but they didn't know the authenticity as well as Priyanka did. So that was really, really great. I'll say one thing too, which is that Priyanka also she understands, she's this global phenomenon. Like she gets a big audience. She understands how to speak to a lot of people. So to Elan's point, she kind of was like, this will work for a lot of people. I just trust me, I know. And she was right. That's like, so.
She gets.
Let's talk about your cast. Your cast was incredible. Obviously, Sarita Chaudhary, like you went legend status with Mississippi Masala. I did the Meet the Calicars thing last night with Mira Nair speaking, and she said they're re-releasing Mississippi Masala. And just last month, I tweeted, why can't I find it on iTunes and this? And I figured out the answer yesterday. They're re-releasing it because, nice. How ahead of its time was it? Obviously, not just the Indian thing, but also, I think in this time with everything that's going on, South Asians have had to ask themselves those questions, what we're doing in the, battle for civil rights. And it's like she was so far ahead of the game. So I was excited to hear that. So, a legend like that. And then, Sunita Mani, like the one movie I saw at Sundance this year was Save Yourselves. So I was like, who's this? So I've been like, she, and her look, her vibe, like is so different in your film. Like, it's just like, wow. And I know she's on Glow too, which and I wasn't familiar with Omar, but he was great too. So how did that cast come together?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the casting, I think is like, as you well know as a producer, it's like over half of the success of the movie or how good it's going to be is it's all in the casting. It's all about finding the right people who are going to body the roles, that they have chemistry. Sarita was on our radar from pretty early on. We knew her from Homeland and from her past movies, and we're just like, this is and the thing that we liked about Sarita as well is that because in her previous roles she has this sort of violent sexual backstory.
Well, and the one thing I want to mention is that, like, to Elan's point, part of the thing is that the movie begins with her character as sort of this like quote unquote typical Indian mom figure, right? So like usually it's like the figure is, usually that character is pretty one note. Like, and I think what's nice about the movie is that the character has this backstory, like Elan said. So Elan, I just want to put the context in before you know what I mean?
No, yeah. Well, and it's something where we had looked at some of the Bollywood actors as well. I mean, we looked at the Irfan Khan, Madhuri Dixit, and and different people that Priyanka also just knew personally. But which is funny. But what we found was that given that we were casting like a month and a half out, even things like immigration, the U.S. has made it so hard that we just couldn't get them in. We didn't even consider them because we couldn't. And the thing is, I was
gonna say, like, and like what was, I mean, to Elan's point though earlier is that, like, Sarita basically, like Elan said, has this filmography that has this violence and sex and this, Perfect Murder and Mr. Salam, Kama Sutra, And so automatically casting someone of her caliber and background means as soon as you see her, you think, okay, this is not just your typical Indian mom. No one would cast her as just an Indian mom, quote unquote. And we love that, because the reality is all of our moms were in their 20s once. All of them had crushes in their teens. All of them have backgrounds that we probably don't know about. And it's fun to have a daughter, discover that basically.
Well, I'll say that for some of the other roles, like Bernard White, he was the dad in the audio play, and he was like he did a wonderful job of that. And he kind of has this, he plays this atypical kind of Indian man, at least in portrayal in movies, in terms of he's just a good, kind man, and who like supports his wife. And it's weird how movies don't tend to show that version of Indian men, whereas most Indian uncles I know are just good, kind people. So it's like, why not have that as a character? And so we love that in the script, and like Bernard really brought that out.
Yeah, and I'll mention with Sunita, you mentioned, I think the real key to that role was it's such a serious movie in a lot of ways. There's so many kind of very intense dramatic roles that we knew we needed an actress who had a comedic background. Like we knew we needed someone who could balance both in order to kind of bring realism and sarcasm and levity to very dramatic scenes. And I think that's where Sunita was kind of this perfect mix. Like really, she was ideal. She was our top choice, ideal for this role, because very few actors can do both so well. I almost can't think of another one who kind of rides the line like she does, and especially an Indian actor, is fantastic.
And she also, I mean, we first saw her in Mr. Robot, where she played Trenton, and then in Glow, and it's like, she did and really we first saw her. I don't know if you've seen the Turn Down for What video, the one where they're bashing through the, look up Turn Down for What. It has 1 billion views on YouTube. And you'll see what I'm talking about. She's amazing, but it's like it's the number 6 all-time video on YouTube. So
I mean, and the last thing I'll just mention with Omar is just that, like, Omar was actually a very tricky part to cast, and we did audition quite a few people for it, because he had to be believable as a rom-com charming lead at the beginning and believable as a monster at the end, and you had to sort of feel like it was the same person. A lot of actors, when they made the switch, almost you stopped buying it. You were like, that's not the same person. They're just changing roles.
They turned from James Bond to Hannibal Lecter, whereas we needed him to stay James Bond, just be
exactly,
etc.
And with that cultural background and cultural understanding the story, like and you don't have, this is why I rarely do stuff that's recorded, because I'm always afraid of what I'll say and what I'm allowed to say. But like, were you able to kind of feel like you do what you want, but because you, or was it like, well, these are the Blumhouse rules, like, because like I felt like I could tell people like you were behind the story, whereas on other stories you can tell where it goes into exploitative or just simplifying all the characters. It seemed like all your input, but I was just curious about the process. I'm sure anyone listening is always like, Blumhouse being the gold standard for genre right now. It's like, what's it like to work with them?
I mean, they were honestly wonderful. I mean, I have to say, I think they're very cost conscious, and I think everyone kind of knows that. They're very careful, but I think it's not really a bad thing. I mean, like, the cost conscious comes from their priority is always quality. Like they were always telling us, put your money on the screen. Like we don't like to waste money on unnecessary things. So they were always pushing. That said, they hired us for authenticity. I mean, I think they were very encouraging and honestly really listened when we said, this is something that needs to be this way, this is something that way. I mean, we had some big asks. I mean, like, when we came on, the plan was to do all the India shooting in New Orleans and like dressed up alleyways and that kind of thing. The underwater part was not part of the original script or the original plan. And those were, as you know, as a producer, those were fairly expensive asks. And so when we said these are going to be essential and add so much value to the film, they said, okay, let's figure out how to do it. Once we kind of showed them why it would add so much value. And we really believe those two elements are like massive parts of the movie. And really, we appreciated that a lot. I mean, we felt a lot of free reign, again, as long as we were under budget and on time.
Yeah. In fairness, there were a few things, like example, I remember when we were talking about the underwater unit, you know, they were like, well, don't go overtime for the next 7 days and we'll talk about it. Like something like that.
Yeah, as a producer, I can respect that. Everything, it's a cost benefit opportunity cost analysis. You spend here, you can't here. And that's, I appreciate them. They do it at that level, and I try to do it on a much smaller level. Was the plan, and this can kind of segue into specific to this movie, but also the industry, was the plan this Amazon release from the beginning, or is that something that changed because of COVID and because did you work, was festival, because distribution was already set,
Yeah, so this was the plan from the beginning, and mainly is that Blumhouse and Amazon, they wanted to do this sort of welcome to the Blumhouse anthology series, and so this was always sort of, I think that there were some consideration initially, but I think that there was this series of 8 films that Evil Eye, once it was part of it, it was always planned to be released on Amazon. I think in part because they're really trying to get it out sort of in a wider way than even theatrical they felt like could do, because on the Amazon they can really like promote that kind of everywhere all at the same time, whereas I think that a movie of this scale might get a little lost in the theatrical mix.
What I'll say too is that I think the thinking here, which I think has actually been really successful, was the curation of a group. Like, people have been watching these 4 films like back to back, and I think that's been really, I think there's nothing interesting about having 4 different films of different types of diversity and different types of stories being told that are thematically tied together so that they can promote 4 films at once. It's been really fun, actually, but it was always planned roughly this way.
Yeah,
there's another block coming next year as well. So
it's almost like Black Mirror. It's like it's a bit
a little
of a
bit.
horror
Yeah,
Black
I
Mirror.
think these are like movies. These aren't TV episodes.
So. I'm very pro anthology. Historically speaking, they tell you to stay away from it, but I think it fits in with the way people consume stuff now nicely. We've been talking about ourselves, and I think it's always really exciting because it's like, when we first started, it's like, or not even when we first started, thinking back to, it's like, who were our inspirations and stuff like that. So maybe, saying somebody that was your inspiration in this, and then also let's promote others in the pipeline. So who are some, South Asian filmmakers that you're excited about, and that maybe people listening that watch this, it's like, hey, check these people out too. So, because I think it can't just be about us. It's like, we got to create that same pipeline that so many other, and it's kind of, I don't want to say counter to, we grow up in this weird competition against every other South Asian in our little town. I was one of those, I was 7th in the country in chess. I peaked early, but at the same time, some other Indian in town was doing better at something else, and it's just like, well, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you? It was just like,
be your dad. I'm gonna be your dad. Just 7th?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I actually reconnected with the guy that was number 5 recently. He's a filmmaker. Actually, in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, his friend Morgan is a filmmaker now, and that's when I used to play chess. So I was at those same tables with them, but we don't want to be Indians and talking about chess and spelling bees. But so yeah, who were your inspirations, and then also who are some South Asian filmmakers you're excited about?
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rajeev.
Oh yeah, well, so I'll say, I mean, like, inspiration wise, especially when I was younger, I think of there's certain filmmakers who I think were both doing interesting genre movies, but also telling interesting stories with a more diverse side to it, which is what I tend to be inspired by. So I think of Justin Lin with The Better Luck Tomorrow, for example. It's like a movie that really had an impact on me in terms of something very like grabbing and commercial, but also speaking to a very specific, specific thing. District 9's a favorite of mine. I mean, again, it's like these movies that use a unique and alternate perspective to tell a very commercial story. On the South Asian side, there's a filmmaker I know, actually, Terry Samundra, who has a film coming out on Netflix called Kali Kal, I think that's the name.
Kali.
Kali Kali, yeah. Which looks really, really interesting, and I think she's sort of taking another perspective on a region and like on a story that I think is like, I think there's so much rich storytelling to be done. And then I saw this movie Tumbad a couple of years ago that I'm sure I hope that filmmaker does more films, because that was super interesting, as well, and kind of very well produced. So.
Well, and like there's a few Canadian Americans who I think are doing some really interesting work, like Nish Chaganti, who and he's got a new one coming out in a couple of weeks.
Run
on
Hulu.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we actually talked to him. We did like a roundtable with him for Fantastic Fest, which was cool. And he's a cool dude.
Really smart guy, great filmmaker. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I think that they're like, and like the South Asian filmmakers who are in the U.S., a lot of them are kind of known for genre. I mean, none more so than Night Shyamalan, of course. Who sort of has sort of blown up, of course, and he kind of blew up and then fell down and blew up again, which is. But I think that there's it's fun to see these sort of different kinds of films, that are coming out from these guys, and so I think that the fact that even though Hollywood is this weird place, if someone can deliver, you can push through, and so that I think is presenting opportunity. It's not like that you don't have any chance. Like if this were like the 30s, I would say just forget it in like Hollywood. But like I feel like that the industry has changed sufficiently so that they really are looking more at our movies than at our background and what we can bring to the table with our culture and how we can sort of make our films better, which is nice. So that's cool.
I agree with you 100%. I use this phrase, I don't know where it came from, but you're allowed old stories in new clothes and new stories in old clothes. So like, I did a film a couple years ago called Plus One with Maya Erskine, and I was just an executive producer on that, but it's like, it's the most straight up and down rom-com. Like, but when I tell you the title, you kind of know, but because Maya was the lead and the comedy came through her and you get to meet her family and learn a little bit about her culture, it seems like it's the most fresh, thing you've seen. And I feel like you guys did incredibly by integrating some of the Hindu symbology, and it's just like, it just gives it another new layer. It's like, so even the Western, audience can see it, and it's like, oh, I recognize this, but I don't know this world. So, and I think, the names you guys are talking about are great. I was actually in the production office the day they found out John Cho said yes to Searching, because his co-writer on that and his producer Sev Ohanian. So Sev I met through Ryan Coogler, because when I said Sundance 2013, that's Fruitvale Station's year. So that's the thing. The directors get to go to the top, which you're in great position. The producers just stay, there. But at Cannes, like I asked, Coogler, I was like, what made the engine run on Fruitvale? Because no way, that was great indie film, not only incredible film, great indie filmmaking. How did you get that train? You couldn't. And he was like, Sev Ohanian. And then I recruited Sev to a film in Kentucky. And then like a year later, I met Anish, and it's just like, oh, these guys are next level. So it's cool to see. Sure. Another couple filmmakers. I was, we were talking about it before. It's like, I think Arati Kadav and Cargo. I don't know if you saw it. And then also Megha Ramaswamy. She did a film called What Are the Odds? But it was just like, it was so cool. And I don't know them, but I'm happy to promote their work, because with Cargo, she did, you know, it's a sci-fi, you know, space, but it's dealing with some like reincarnation. So it's got,
Oh, I've seen the trailer for it. I'm
there's
remembering now the film you're talking
elements,
about,
and then
it's a very, I love the premise. It's wild
yeah,
and very fun.
just the fact that
So,
she tackled that and so early in her career, it's like I was just like I'm interested in what this person, you know, has to say. And then Mega Ramaswamy, what are the odds? Is such a quirky like Wes Anderson, and it's like kind type of film, and it's like it's quirky, it's weird, but it's like good for, it's like yes, we shouldn't just have to be straight down the line. Like what we need our Wes Andersons and those kind of, you know, voices too. And I think I think that's exciting. So you know, I feel like everyone's done enough of these Zooms and stuff like that. No one really wants to talk about like COVID and all that. So I'm not really going to go into. I'm not going to go into like how is
Yeah, it's all good. So
how is that you know you know changing the industry. There's other panels that people can go and listen, you know, listen to that. I guess, you know, I always think it's helpful, like, you know, we have people listening, whether it's genre filmmaking, and, you know, you guys put in a lot of work, a lot of years before you get that call from a Blumhouse or something. Like what for a filmmaker starting out, like what's a piece of advice that, you know, you would like to like impart on them? Like it's like yeah, feel free to share.
yeah, I mean, I'll say from my side, I think something that we figured out at some point, and you know, and this is a lifelong race, is that especially now, but it's always been this case, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of filmmakers. I mean, there's a lot of competition. I think that can feel very intimidating. But I think the reality is that like making the way to break through is always to make content that is unique to you. And so I think something we always ask ourselves with every project that we consider is, are we the ones who have to make this? Meaning it's like, does it, like, you know, does any project we do, could someone else have made this? And if the answer is yes, we don't do it.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense. It's like, I think things that like feel like you have an actual vision, you have an actual unique take, and then people will want to watch that take. And I think sometimes it's a mistake to try too hard to kind of please everybody or make something for the market, because what you end up doing when you make something for everybody is you make something for nobody.
Yep.
And I think make something that sort of, you know, to tell your perspective, that perspective becomes more interesting. And I think that's what audiences are craving. They want to, things like the people that we all love, the Phoebe Waller-Bridges and the, you know, like these kind of people, they're succeeding because they're telling a very particular perspective story. And I feel like that's just something that applies to whether you're making big commercial VFX driven films or tiny indies. It doesn't, both, like the best ones work with the perspective, whether you're Denis Villeneuve doing Dune or whether you're, you know, doing a $4 million movie for Amazon. Like it's, you know, so I just think that's the thing. It's like,
it's also something where, it's also something where, you know, I think that if you're, you know, especially for young filmmakers, it's easy to be intimidated, and it's easy to want to just jump to being Chris Nolan or James Cameron or whatever it is, you know, and you know, I think that if you're looking at sort of, you know, some, like when I go to and look at sort of all the synopses, the thing I always look at is what's that idea where I'm like, oh, I wish I thought of that, or oh, that's cool, I'm glad someone's putting that out into the world or whatever. I was like, oh, that's cool idea. So when we're trying to come up with ideas, or when we're trying to sort of figure out what we want to do next, I mean, for us, it really is all about, like, oh, what's that thing that's not in the multiplex that I wish was in the multiplex? What's that movie that I think that, because you're sort of making a movie that you want to see. You are looking at the market, yeah, as we were saying, and all stuff, but ultimately the most important market is yourself, because inevitably a movie's going to take a year or two or however long it's going to be. You're going to do endless drafts. You're going to, I mean, normal position. So this better be something that you want. And the second sort of aspect of that is also, it can be something fairly simple. Like I see a lot of these convoluted scripts or convoluted ideas and all that stuff. And like, as you know, usually the simplest ideas are the ones that are the ones that win, because all of the story comes from other stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
just
I mean,
keep
it's
simple.
jumping off that too. Just one thing I wanted to say too, which is resources. But I think the other thing I hear from a lot of young filmmakers is they're like, oh, I wish I had enough money to do this or that. And I think I would encourage all young filmmakers to watch films that cost very little, because some of my favorite films are tiny, like, you know, Babadook, or this Japanese film called Afterlife, or the short film Mama, which was made by Andy Muschietti. Like, these films are tiny, tiny films, usually in one location.
Like Lights
And
Out.
like, yeah,
Lights Out
the
was like shot on an iPhone or something.
but the reason why they popped is because they were directorially strong. The writing was strong. Like, it should, like, they show that you can, like, be aware of what you have and do the best you can with it. Don't just complain or lament what you don't have, because resources will come if you show people what you can do with what you have. And I just think that's something people, we all, like, all films don't have enough resources. It doesn't matter how big it is.
Yeah,
You always-
your
yeah.
pieces of advice are like right on. I think too many people write for the multiplex because that's what they're used to seeing. And it's just like, look, like I always say this, like, the game is rigged, but we can rig it in our favor. It's like you notice once the doors start opening, but nobody told me that those first years. You know, when I first started, people said, give yourself 7 to 10 years to feel like you're heading in the right direction. And I was like, you know, I was 29, remember? And I was like, are you crazy? Like, you know, I'll be, you know, and, you know, 4 years in, my first film at Sundance, my fourth film, I was like, see, I knew it wouldn't take me that long. But then that's when you start learning about the business of film and distribution. And then, you know, then I, you know, did some films include like My Friend Dahmer, and then Assassination Nation, 10th year, my 10th film, you know, sold for 10 million. And it's like, all right, I think I'm starting to figure out that part a little bit more. Another piece of like advice, like, you know, on top of your advice that I think is great, I think, like, you know, things like this. And I think, you know, everybody talks about networking and that kind of stuff. And I feel like most people do like networking wrong, because they go into situations hoping someone up top is going to reach down, Jason Blum's going to call and pull them all the way to the top. And there's exceptions to the rules. We read about those rules. We hope for those rules. But the reality is you gotta put more into the circle than you're ever trying to take it out, and play the long game and develop your you know, these are my peers. And I think developing your peer group, because now, you know, you're looking and it's like, oh, now my friends have directed Marvel films and that kind of stuff. And I started at 29, not knowing anyone in the industry. You know, I on the finance accounting side, a few people, but not the indie world, which is might as well be two, you know, separate industries. And I think also now it's easier than ever to connect. You know, I started following you guys on Twitter when I was like, oh, a South Asian name, they did this, I didn't, you know, and then, you know, in our little chat before, we found out we went to the same party at Cannes, you know, 3 years ago.
Like 3 years ago.
And it all comes around, and it's easier than ever to become a part of the conversation, whether it's through Fangoria, whether it's through this, whether it's through Twitter. And I think that's just so critical, because it's the long game. This industry, it's not a passive sport. So I thought y'all's like, the other two pieces of advice I usually give are each of the ones you said. So I wanted to add the 1/3 that I hadn't said.
I add one thing to your piece of advice too, which is just that, and just kind of, you know, to your point, it's like, you just, like, you don't know who's going to be relevant to you. So I think be a nice person, just to be a nice person, but also just, you know, just be aware that, like, if you treat a PA badly, or if you're rude to a secretary, you don't know, like, you know, a PA on a film I did a couple of years ago is now like a top screenwriter. You know, this woman in film school who like produced my first short film is now the head of film at MRC. Like, it's one of those things where it's like people are driven and will rise, and it's just like, it will serve you better to be kind to as many people as possible.
It becomes a small industry fast, and word travels fast. You know, I've done
if you're a dick, basically, people will know.
Yeah, and you know, I've done
not hire you.
I've done films now in like 7 or 8 different states, and it's like, I love getting people jobs, and every once in a while you'll get that call. What do you think about this person? And in my head, I'm like, have a seat, you know. And yeah, I think being kind, and I also think, everybody thinks, Sundance, South by, Tribeca. I think also the regional festivals, or if we're talking genre, like I got into genre because of the community I saw when I went to the Chattanooga Film Festival 3 years ago. And now here I am in Chattanooga, but it was like Jen Wexler, all these people that I was like, wow, this is a community that supports each other a little bit more than the indie drama community, where it seems like you're battling, jockeying for those limited spots. And then, now going to, last year I went to Montreal and Fantasia, and I think specifically within the genre community, it seems to be more, supportive. And like you said, you do not know the trajectory of anyone's career, so it serves you and behooves you better to just be nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I always tell people, weirdly, when students ask me, is I'm just like, walk into every room trying to make someone else's life better, trying to make them money, trying to make their life easier. Like if you just operate that way, like every pitch you ever do, like when you're walking into to pitch an executive, your goal is to make them money, or to make their life easier, or to have
or solve a problem that they have. It's like, we don't know.
That's how you get representation. That's how you land a movie. It's always just, how are you an added value?
Yeah. You're putting more into the circle than you're trying to take out. The amount of times I've gone, I rarely will pitch someone first time I meet. It's like, until I know what you're about, makes no sense. It's like so many people's strategies throw everything up against the wall, hoping something sticks. And it's just like,
that's good to know, because I have a rom-com for you. No, I'm just
kidding. I like, well, going back to, being on time and on budget, like that's the same thing in how we, as a producer, how we deal with our time after, the two most finite things, time and money. So where do we spend I don't have some huge team to vet all kinds of scripts. It's like, I want to help people that I like and I think are talented. We see these films, they stay with us for a decade, so it's like I'm not interested in that artist that can't get along with people. Like that's just impossible. Like
the majority of those people don't go, they just don't go anywhere. We hear about the difficult people who do well because those are the ones who get the press, but like most difficult people, unless you're unless I won't say any names, but unless you're, those people,
you're insanely talented.
Unless you're insanely talented, yeah, exactly. I think, look, it's something where it's like in the end, like the thing about this business that's different from others is that like it's rarely where every day you're there 14 hours in some other job. It's not like
for like weeks or months on end.
Yeah. It's not like when you're in when you're in finance or something. Well, in finance maybe, but in most jobs. Whereas we spend all our times on set and these people in development and like production offices. So we may as well enjoy ourselves while we're there and not just not have a negative atmosphere. Because I've been on those sets and it sucks.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
Yeah.
100%. Unless someone from Fangoria wants to jump in, I didn't check my notes as much as I probably should have. I just kind of went with the conversation. So hopefully I didn't screw up everything they wanted done. But like, I'd love, if these are our kind of closing things. So obviously Evil Eye on Amazon, but what other works of yours should, people check out, and what's next for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of our previous work, I would encourage people to look up our Netflix series Jinn, which is on Netflix now. It's a supernatural teen horror thriller TV series. Our short film Seam, which is on Dust right now, I think is actually really it's a sci-fi kind of like romantic drama epic action film.
Yeah,
if I could sum it up.
It is a drama, but it definitely has a ton of action because it's a big. It was our pitch to this. I mean, we love like Jim Cameron District 9 scale type of genre film. So we made one. So
exactly. In terms of what's next for us, we're basically very actively. We have a couple things in development that are kind of irons in the fire. We have a TV series with Blumhouse that's set in India that may or may not be our next thing that we really love. There's like another TV series that we're kind of going out and pitching on. We have like a sci-fi feature that we're about to go out with. So we have a couple things that we're in the works on. It's I think we're trying to figure out what will be the next thing, the green light. And as you know, it's kind of like a horse race until one of them crosses the finish line.
We both love like movies, and ideally like we love the careers of guys like Alex Garland, like Denis of Villeneuve, like these
That's
guys.
Where we want to go in that direction.
Yeah, guys and girls who are making really interesting, smart work that's really about something. We tend to like genre because we just like working in that space, but we certainly sort of so we're looking for that thing that's going to be sort of, that it would be our sort of breakout kind of thing. I mean, that's really
we'd
cool.
happily jump from Sicario to Dune, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So
love that. I'll do my self plug too. We have a film, Brian Bertino, who did The Strangers. So I'll give a genre.
I can't wait to see it. By the way, the trailer looks amazing.
Yeah,
his new film, The Dark and the Wicked, which I would count as my first official horror film. I don't look at My Friend Dahmer and Assassination Nation, while they count as genre. I don't. It's true horror. So, speaking of like working with like people that have this, incredible vision, and it was really cool experience. But that comes out November 6th, and then soon thereafter on Shudder. They're still figuring out what the release. And I'm working on my first South Asian Indian rom-com called Rearranged, based on the true story of the life of Zarna Garg, who wrote it. She's it won the Austin Film Festival for Best Comedy Script last year and a Nichols semifinalist. So that, because it's like now, like you said, like I want to tell our stories, and in your advice piece, it reminded me of that question I always ask people. It's like, why this project and why you? And I've been asking that for 10 years, but now all of a sudden authenticity and representation is an important thing. But it's like, it's been an important part of the conversation for so long. So looks like we're getting some word from Fangoria. This has been a lot of fun. I had no clue how it was going to go. Hopefully you guys are happy. Hopefully Fangoria is happy. Thanks everybody for joining. They do every Wednesday at the same time. Hope you join us each week to meet creators and filmmakers from all over the world. I'm really excited for Fangoria and its future. Couldn't be in better hands with Tara Ansley. So, follow them on Twitter and other socials, and subscribe. Yep. They have a magazine. So this was cool. Yeah, this was great to meet in this forum. I'll see you guys on Twitter.
Okay, yeah.
And one day we'll be allowed in real life again.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, we're gonna drink whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, a huge thanks to Fangoria and Tara. It's been your support has been really, really incredible, and we're very, very thankful. And thank you, Milan, for just doing this and we're fans of yours, so it's been wonderful.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Let's try and meet at another house party at Cannes. That's the idea.
Sounds like a plan.
That sounds like a plan.